Netflix and Ryan Reynolds' latest The Atom Project is here to give us some true 80s nostalgia, paying homage to a number of sci-fi movies that came before it, but also being its own original movie. In this video, we're going to take a look at 25 or so things that you may have missed in the movie, such as references and Easter eggs, as well as some behind-the-scenes trivia and stories that went into making the movie. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Now, it's hard to remember a time where Ryan Reynolds wasn't seemingly leading every blockbuster movie, but we only have to go back as far as 2014 and to his role as Deadpool to see the source of it all, with the movie firmly establishing him as a leading man and causing his career to subsequently skyrocket. Deadpool and Ryan Reynolds are so intrinsically linked that they are effectively symbiotes, and so it's hard to cut the Ryan Reynolds out of Deadpool and vice versa. So, it's unsurprising then that Reynolds' latest blockbuster pays reference to his most iconic character. One of the most famous lines and most memed moments from the first Deadpool movie is the superhero landing.
Woo! Superhero landing!
In the Atom Project, as young Adam launches himself to a higher level where Big Adam is, he lands in the superhero style and cracks the joke, superhero landing, just like his older self did in Deadpool. Keeping on with the Marvel and Deadpool theme, the movie ends on an emotional climax as Lewis and the Atoms play a game of catch for the last time before both Atoms disappear, returning to their correct point in time. However, before the game of catch begins, as Lewis grabs the mitts and ball from a box, we can see two rather familiar stickers on the lid. One of Deadpool and one of the Hulk, who are, of course, played by Ryan Reynolds and Mark Ruffalo, respectively. Now, while this is at the very least a reference to the actors, Marvel fans were quick to speculate whether or not this little Easter egg was setting up Deadpool 3 and a crossover between Deadpool and the Hulk. It has been speculated that Deadpool will be making his way to the MCU in the Doctor Strange sequel, and this theory gained traction after it was announced that Shawn Levy, who directed the Atom Project, will also be at the helm for Deadpool 3 in what will be his third successive collaboration with Ryan Reynolds. Now, whether it is setting up a Deadpool 3 crossover is unclear, but either way, it was a nice touch. But it wasn't just Ryan Reynolds and Mark Ruffalo who have the Marvel connection, with Zoe Saldana, of course, playing Gamora in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and Avengers Infinity War, and Endgame, which, of course, meant she starred alongside Ruffalo. But outside of the MCU, Jennifer Garner also played Elektra in both the 2003 Daredevil movie and the 2005 Elektra movie. But, yeah, the less said about them, the better. To be honest, though, it's hard to have a movie where an actor hasn't played a Marvel character, and I'm fully expecting Walker Scobell and Catherine Keener to make their way sooner than later. Now, you definitely caught this one, but another Marvel reference comes when young Adam suggests the multiverse theory to adult Adam, who dismisses his younger self saying, "We've watched too many movies." This is, of course, a reference to the multiverse that has become rather prevalent in Marvel's Phase 4, and it again reinforces the theory that Deadpool will be rocking up in the Doctor Strange sequel. Anyway, back to the subtle Easter eggs now. Whenever a movie has anything to do with time travel, it will instantly be compared to Back to the Future, and the Atom Project is no different, and the movie does even make references to the classic sci-fi films. Not only does the way that Big Adam nearly accidentally hit on his own mother kind of remind us of Back to the Future, but while the Adams sit outside a motel having a beer, we can see that the motel's name appears as Pine Ridge Motel. Now, given the amount of time the camera sat looking at the sign made it obvious that it has some importance, and that's because it is likely a nod to the Back to the Future series where Pine is used in naming several sites that change from Twin Pine to Lone Pine as the consequence of time travel. Of course, there's also a reference to the movie's sequel, Back to the Future Part 2, as well. Now that's because Catherine Keener's Maya Sorian goes back in time to give her younger self advice in buying stocks so she can become rich. Now this is, of course, similar to what Biff does in Back to the Future Part 2, and also, I guess, Hot Tub Time Machine when Lou goes back in time and invents Lugal and Motley Lou. Now, there are obviously references to Star Wars, the most obvious one being the lightsaber-like weapon that Big Adam wields, and young Adam even makes a joke that it is a lightsaber, which is, of course, the main weapon used by the Jedi. Now, this isn't the first time that Sean Levy has introduced a lightsaber into his movies, with Ryan Reynolds wielding one in Free Guy, but seeing as that was a Disney-owned movie and The Adam Project is a Netflix one, Levy made sure to state that the one in The Adam Project was not a lightsaber. In an interview, Levy said, "It's like MAG CYL. Magnetic cylinder? I don't know. I had to design it. Basically, fear of lawsuit led me to multiple design iterations so that it was never just going to be a shafty beam of light, especially a double fighty thing like Darth Maul used to wield. So no, we didn't need permission this time because we're saving those cards for when we really need it on Free Guy movies." While the video game Young Adam plays certainly looks like something out of Star Wars, the most direct reference is when he gives Big Adam the codename Red Leader during the movie's major climax. This is, of course, a nod to Star Wars, with Red Leader, or Red One, being the call sign attributed to the leader of Red Squadron. But it's not just Star Wars that's the only star-themed sci-fi referenced. At the end of the movie, it's revealed that Zoe Saldana's Laura is a computational linguist, which can be seen as perhaps a nod to Saldana's role as Nyota Uhura in Star Trek. Uhura is a translator and communications officer who specializes in linguistics, cryptography, and philology and knows multiple alien languages. Now, another star-themed movie The Adam Project arguably references is The Last Starfighter. In The Adam Project, Adam essentially learns to fly in the simulator that his dad built for him. Therefore, parallels can be drawn with The Last Starfighter, which follows a teenager who, after finally achieving the high score on Starfighter, his favorite arcade game, meets the game's designer who reveals that he created Starfighter as a training ground for developing and recruiting actual pilots to help fight a war in space. Maybe it's a coincidence, but it definitely adds to that 80s nostalgia that The Adam Project was going for. Now, you definitely caught this one, but to be honest with you, I was kinda struggling to get to 25, so I added this movie reference in anyway. The movie, of course, pays a reference to Terminator, when Ryan Reynolds alludes that 2050 in The Adam Project is worse than the dystopic future we see in The Terminator, and both movies, of course, involve time travel. I know you caught it, but as I said, I needed to get to 25 somehow. Another reference to a movie that you probably caught is the shirt that one of Lewis's students wears. The shirt in question has a picture of Nicolas Cage on it with the text John Travolta as well. This is, of course, a reference to the 1997 action movie Face Off, where John Travolta and Nicolas Cage end up switching places after having face transplant surgery to look like the other. Yes, it makes no sense, but hey, that was the 90s. Of course, this movie makes some very obvious references to time travel, but a subtle one comes with the name of the Adams' dog, Hawking. Hawking is, of course, a reference to the English theoretical physicist, cosmologist, and author who famously held a party for time travelers but did not send out the invitations until after the party. Now, although no one showed up for the festivities, Hawking did hold out some hope that traveling back in time could be possible according to the laws of the universe. Having the dog named Hawking, then, is extremely fitting, especially as the year he was named, 2018, was also the year that Hawking sadly passed away. Speaking of Hawking the dog, he is apparently Jennifer Garner's real-life dog, Birdie. In fact, Jennifer Garner often takes to Instagram with Birdie, where the duo read books together, and Birdie has since grown quite a fan club. Now, while the movie may have just been released, The Adam Project has actually been in development for a decade. The script was originally optioned by Paramount Pictures, with Tom Cruise apparently attached to the project to play the leading role, but the script ended up in movie limbo before Paramount's option eventually ran out, allowing Netflix to pick it up for themselves and turning it into one of their original pictures. Like most movies these days, The Adam Project has its fair share of foreshadowing. For instance, Jennifer Garner's warning that Adam should start thinking about his future as it's coming sooner than you think. But one of the major pieces of foreshadowing comes when Lewis effectively sets up his own fate, saying, "Physics is a slog. It's a slog. We are meant to work on problems that our children will solve. You might find the odd solution here or there, but you will die before your life's work is done. Your cold, lifeless husk will be moldering in the ground while generations that come after you will be finishing the work that you started." Which, all in all, basically sums up the entire movie.
To quote the Romans, enjoy yourselves.
Now, Mark Ruffalo and Jennifer Garner as Adam's parents are a married couple, but this isn't the first time the duo have played a romance together, with them both previously playing love interests in the 2004 movie 13 Going on 30. See? I told you I was struggling to get to 25. Now, while it's never stated where the movie is set, at least I didn't catch a location, we can tell by the foliage that it was set on the West Coast. And the movie was, of course, shot there, with it being filmed in Ryan Reynolds' hometown of Vancouver, with him joking on Instagram about giving it a lingering, uncomfortably indulgent hug to my beautiful hometown of Vancouver. As we mentioned, this movie was essentially stuck in movie hell, and it looked like it would never make it to the screen, until Netflix eventually acquired the rights to it in 2020. Then, they eventually approached Reynolds about the movie during post-production of Free Guy, with Levy saying, well, the script had been developed for 6 or 7 years before it came to Ryan, and then me. Then David Ellison said, I have this movie that I think you might like. Reynolds instantly thought about bringing Levy into the role, with him saying, this is a long one. Sean and I were both looking for a story that told the father-son, mother-son story in a strange new light. But we've been flirting with this other film for a long time, and it just felt square peg round hole. It wasn't quite getting there. That's when David Ellison at Skydance, he came over to my apartment. It rung all the bells. It was everything. I basically went running to Sean to either beg him or threaten him, whatever came first or came to top of mind, to do this movie together. Thankfully, he saw the same mechanics that I saw that made it so romantic and beautiful. Now, when casting a young Ryan Reynolds, it always helps to have a kid that is almost like him, and that was the case with Walker Scobell. Now, that shouldn't have been surprising given how much of a fan of Deadpool Scobell is, with Levy saying that he was absolutely obsessed with the character. Levy said, when we found Walker, we knew he was special and talented, but we didn't know that he was a sick fan of Deadpool. So he showed up ready with the chops, but he can channel Ryan. In fact, Scobell is so obsessed with Deadpool that he can recite the "fuck Wolverine" monologue from Deadpool 2 just from memory. This love of Deadpool certainly helped him get the role, as he beat out hundreds of other kids to play a younger version of Ryan, with Levy saying Scobell's way of channeling Ryan was their superpower on the movie. Reynolds says that Scobell is essentially an extroverted version of himself when he was that age, and that with having 3 older brothers, Reynolds only had his mouth as a weapon. Reynolds said, he felt like a much more extroverted version of me as a kid. I was much more shy than he was, but he really could turn that on. I really like that his mouth and the smart aleck or smart ass behavior that he has was similar to mine, which was a maladaptive coping mechanism. In an interview, Reynolds said, oh, Walker's amazing. I fire off 10 alts to any given joke or moment. Also, we're always looking for it too. Again, Sean and I both were sitting there listening to this movie. So there's all sorts of things that come about out of nowhere and work in surprising ways. It was just unbelievable. Now, one of the main reasons Reynolds was drawn to the script was the personal connection he felt and how it also emulated the relationship he had with his very own father. In an interview, Reynolds said, I have not done a lot of movies that really reflected my own personal life the way Adam Project does. I have stories that I tell myself about my father that sort of helped make sense of my own deficiencies or my own shortcomings. I have a very, very complicated relationship with my father who is dead. I would love to have a conversation with my dad when he was my age and really look him in the eye and see him as the human being that he was, with all of his flaws and all of the things that made him wonderful as well. Now, one aspect of the movie that had a crazy amount of detail was the house that the Reeds live in. Production designer Claude Paré was given the task of creating a mid-century modern house that features lots of wood grain that feels inherently manly, but also be complemented by the softer yet still period-appropriate decor touch that would have been added by Lewis's wife, Ellie. Paré also wanted to give a melancholy, lived-in feeling to the house to fully explain their living situation. The idea was to make it look like the mom wasn't quite on top of keeping the house together because of her busy life and because she's been a single mom for a year or two. While elements of the script did change over time, one thing that always stayed the same was Lewis's fate. In fact, Levy said no one ever campaigned for a happy ending where Lewis didn't die, and in fact, having the movie end on a bittersweet, tear-jerking ending was always on the cards. While Levy wanted it to end on a game of catch, as he thought this non-verbal form of male bonding was the best and most organic way to end the movie.
Woo! Superhero Superhero landing! Yeah, that's really hard on your knee.
And finally, while a sequel hasn't been announced as of saying these words anyway, perhaps a sequel could go into the post-apocalyptic future and show us an even older Adam. If so, who should play the part? Anyone else kind of want it to be Jim Carrey?